is America.
America!
I do love America.
Be a part of the show at 859-88. The Kramer Show on NewsTalk at 101.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to hour number 2 of the Kramer program. That's P-R-O-G-R-U-H-M. Program. Scott Major joins us today, as he always does on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 a.m., bright and early. Scott Major from Major Parúas and the Storm Help Team, stormhelpteam.org. Scott gives out so much great information. Sir, good morning to you.
How you doing today, pal?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Everything's wonderful, my friend.
Everything is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Scott, so, on the last show, we took a lot of phone calls, and we had a lot of great, useful information, as we always do with you. It's been, we're coming up, today's August 1, so we're about a half a month away, or actually less than the time, putting us at 10 months. And it's going to be a year anniversary of this hurricane right around the corner, right before you know it. Where do you want to start today, Mr. Major? What do you want to talk about to begin?
Sure. So we seem to be getting more and more calls from insurance companies now. We probably resolved another $1 million worth of claims in the past week or so. And I think that the key has been to make sure that each one of the listeners has sufficient documentation in their file to support their claim. So in other words, most of the people have taken all the pictures and had the public adjuster do the report, the estimate, and maybe they've got a general contractor involved, and perhaps they've got an engineer if it's something structural. There's nothing that is more supportive or more compelling to the insurance company than having overwhelming data in your favor. So if you're claiming that you have broken, windows, or your roof is bad, or you have structural problems, and you have an engineering report that supports your claims, it's going to make it more difficult for the insurance company to deny that claim without having your own engineer go out there and do things. If you have a general contractor who is a reputable general contractor, and they have put together a detailed estimate, not just a one-page, I'm going to fix your house, but a detailed estimate, it becomes more difficult for the insurance company to object. And all of these documentations, all these types of support for your claims help in a number of ways. And one of the most important ways it helps is that if I am representing you and I say to the insurance company, we have an estimate that is for $50,000, and it's a detailed 10 or 20 or 30 page or however long the estimate is, and it has all the photographs accompanying it. And I would, dear insurance company, we have provided you with this 50-page estimate, and, we're asking you to pay. And if you're not going to pay, I'm asking you to line item, to go line by line and tell me which items you're not going to pay for and why. This is exceedingly difficult for them to do. And instead of saying we're just denying the claim or not responding, when you put their feet to the fire, when you force them, if you write their appropriate letter, or we do, what happens is it becomes extremely difficult. So now you don't like the fact that we're charging $28,000 for a roof, but you don't have another vendor in town that will, fix the roof for the $12,000 you're saying that you're willing to pay for. If I get you into a deposition, if I'm in litigation, if I filed a lawsuit and I'm taking the deposition of that corporate representative or that that private adjuster, that desk level adjuster, and I ask them to look at the camera and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury exactly what items are not appropriate for recompense, and they don't respond, you can imagine how embarrassing it is. If I say, listen, you have made an estimate. You have claimed that only $12,000 is necessary to fix the roof. I want you to tell me under oath how many vendors that you can identify we'll fix that roof for $12,000 because my client would love to save you money. And the answer is usually no. Of the hundreds or thousands of cases that I've seen or handled, of the hundreds of depositions, every single time it becomes extremely difficult when you put their feet to the fire and you say, well, it's been 10 months now, and you still can't explain to me what it is that supports your basis for not paying these line items. And if you see some of the estimates are very detailed. So I'll take out the estimate, and I'll say there are 162 items on this estimate, from the plywood to the drywall to the nails. Why don't you show me which ones of these items you're not going to pay for and why? Explain it. What happens is when you do this, you not only have a humiliation quotient on their part, but you're setting them up for that bad faith where they have no reason to have denied your claim. And now your claim becomes triple the amount. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you sit, this is a necessary evil for us to do to promote the insurance company to pay the full value. And if they don't, they're going to have to suffer by having to pay a penalty, some sort of additional penalty, such as attorney's fees, triple damages, emotional stress, other types of consequential damages. I have a case right now with a famous doctor in your town that she is unable to fully work because the mold has gotten so bad in her home that it has made her ill. I mean, just talking about, it's just crazy. And I'll tell you that they had a public adjuster on board, and the public adjuster did not even disclose to the insurance company that she was ill. You know, they did not go out there and get an engineer to explain how when you have this form of mold, this aspergillus form, you have to tear that house down to the studs, or you have to take a substantial amount of that house away because you can't just remediate mold. People don't realize all mold, all problems are not completely remediatable. In other words, that they're not necessarily able to eliminate all of that mold because it can, the spores inside the wood or whatever can regenerate. So all of these kinds of things, as you're listening to me, you're seeing, and the listeners are hearing, yes, if the insurance company has a valid reason for why they're not paying, by golly, tell us so that we can fully understand and appreciate it, and maybe they're right. But if not, you're not going to get away. I certainly am not going to let them get away with this generalized garbage of saying, well, we're not paying, or our person went out there and said it's $12,000, yet there's nobody in the country we can find who will fix it for $12,000, and somehow that's okay. And then you're left frustrated sitting there saying, I'm still not getting my entire amount. And so many people are compromising and selling, settling and then being frustrated and angry. You know, and when you combine that with the idea that every listener should be calling the 844-800-LAWS number just to get the name of a good insurance agent, you know, you talk about full protection for you so that in the future, we're going to make sure we have enough coverage and the proper coverage for what we need. And just to give you an example, this particular physician that I mentioned just earlier, you know, the insurance agent did not think it was appropriate or failed to understand what's called business interruption insurance. And so she ended up with no business interruption insurance, and she's lost hundreds of thousands of dollars of clients because of problems associated with the business not being able to operate at its optimal standpoint. And that is not going to be just, well, you'll have to just swallow that pill. That is, where is the insurance agent in this? And again, just like there are lawyers that fail to act, there are public adjusters or there are insurance companies, the bottom line is you are entitled to recover all of the money that you were due. And in order to do that, you need a professional who's going to be this thorough and is going to hold the insurance company, their feet to the fire, to just be honest and have integrity. And if in fact they do, and it turns out that you're only entitled to a certain amount, we gladly recommend to our clients to accept that amount. But in the lion's share of cases, as you and I have unfortunately lived through, and for me it's been decades of this, you have a lot of insurance companies, a lot of desk-level adjusters that aren't supporting their claims of either non-payment or lower payment with any kind of empirical data that is helpful to the listener. And you and I have talked about this for months. It is so very important that people make sure that they get the best lawyer they can and to not wait any longer, whether they're with an adjuster or anybody else, unless the insurance company has said, the only reason why I'm not paying you is I'm missing this piece of paper. You have got to be out of your mind to wait any longer and not engage really good lawyers to pursue this claim. I mean, I have filed, 50, 60, 70, or 80 lawsuits in the last month or month and a quarter, and I'll tell you that it is just yielding tremendous results. And not only because we're just filing suits, because any lawyer can do that, but we're filing suits that are making such onerous demands for documents, that are asking the insurance company to prove what they did every day since you made a claim, to show where these adjusters are that went out to your property, to show each and every fact, document, treatise, case law support for why they're not paying any portion of your claim. That scares the bejesus out of them. That makes them understand, oh my God, we have exposure. And that is why we're even getting phone calls right after we send our letter saying we represent people, and right after we're filing suit, even though we haven't even begun to litigate. So these are important things that we want to remind the listener of their true power, that they should not feel impotent to act, and that the time continues to be now to take assertive action to protect your interests and to get the right people to help you to get to where you need to go.
I'm so sorry. My allergies have been insane, and so like coughing and sneezing, my eyes watering. I have some questions about the things that you just said, and one of them is if maybe we have mold, and I don't know. But my question, ironically, is about mold. If you have mold, first of all, how would a public adjuster come in? How could you be a public adjuster and go into someone's home and not know and identify the mold that's there? Okay, but that's a rhetorical question. But the real question is, if you have mold in your home and you've got contractors and public adjusters and all these people that are in and out, and they don't tell you that you have mold, and then you get sick, legally speaking, is that someone's fault for not telling you that you're sick due to the mold because we didn't inform you or we didn't see it? How does that go legal-wise?
The answer is yes. Everybody who has knowledge, who is in a reasonable position to have knowledge, to be able to understand that condition, has a duty to protect you. I will tell you that for most listeners, it would be really, really important for every one of you to go and get some mold remediation done. And what I mean by that is there are companies, such as a company called Bioplant, that will come into your premises and they will spray. It's essentially ionized water. It's essentially a oxidized and a special kind of treatment with water that kills the bacteria, say, inside of your air conditioning unit, that the condensation inside of your vents and areas where spores can be spit out on a continual basis, because just about everybody who had any kind of moisture, excessive moisture, that was not immediately dried, which is like 1% didn't have this, is likely to have some sort of mold-like substance that could create just these subtle, very subtle, annoying allergies at a slightly higher rate than maybe they're used to, all the way up to people becoming obviously very sick. And it's just very important to make sure you get that kind of care provided to you, because it's very simple to do in your house. They literally, like this one particular company that does it with Clorox. You know, literally the company Clorox, so they call it Clorox Clean. they essentially are coming into your premises and they're spraying. It looks like they're using like one of those things that a pest control uses, one of those devices, and they just spray it in the air, and it's not even a chemical, and it just kills every kind of airborne bacteria. And then on top of that, it adheres to your surface so that it just cleans everything out without you having to wipe down anything, and it's just harmless, And so these kinds of things are examples of ways in which, if you were unsure in your home, you could go and get these things done in a way that would be helpful to you. A lot of these things people aren't aware of because they don't understand that, water, when it's sitting around, collects bacteria. It's a breeding ground. That's moisture is a breeding ground for these kinds of things. And this is just one of the many things. Every human being should have their house tested for mold anyway, especially after a storm. But just more significantly, just for overall wellness and health. And in addition, the concept that just because you don't have mold coverage in your insurance policy, or just because you have a limited amount of mold coverage, which is a whole other discussion that infuriates me about adjusters that don't tell you about these things, doesn't mean you shouldn't check your place and make sure it doesn't have mold. On top of that, mold is not just something that you see, oh my God, I see some black things on my air conditioning grill. If you look up, if you work in any building or you work at home and you just look at your air vents and your air vent is not perfectly white, I am telling you, those are mold-based spores that are there. And every single person who looked at their vents would see that often, and that's moisture that builds up, and then it stays wet, and so you have these problems. So pay attention to these things, and make sure that you all get these things checked out, because it's a wellness thing, and it's just a healthy thing to do.
Scott Major from Major Parúas with us.
This is Kramer.
I call it fun.
News Talk at 101. Kramer in the morning. News Talk at 101.
Scott Major with us. Scott Major from Major Parúas and the Storm Help Team. 2 phone numbers for you to remember. Number 1, to get in touch with Scott Major, or Brian Parúas for that matter. 844-800-LAWS. 844-800-LAWS. My apologies for my allergies this morning. Everybody in the building. Allison on Island, I saw her this morning and her face is swollen up on the left side. Bless her heart. The other phone number to remember is 850-233-9988 to get through and get on the air and ask Scott a question. Scott was just talking about this a physician from Panama City who withstood a lot of damage, and now she's sick due to the mold that she did not know about. That's interesting from a couple of perspectives, mainly the law perspective. My other question about what you were telling with that story is the loss of clients. But she has loss of clients because she's sick. So is that something that an insurance company normally pays? And if so, is that hard to prove? Do you have to go through? It seems daunting.
So, sure. Yes, you do have the ability to recover, especially if you are an invitee, a visitor. So if you work in a building, or if you go to a location where you are working that is safe, not your home, and you become, sick in any way, allergies, whatever it is, then there is a actual insurance policy that covers for personal injuries that are suffered by you. It's actually a coverage E type thing. A personal injuries that are suffered by you in the form of allergies or sickness or mold that is recoverable under the insurance policy. Having said that, that's for people who visit other places, or if you're working in an environment that might have mold. That's important. And I keep emphasizing, and I continue to emphasize, every business, every person should encourage their businesses to have some sort of testing done by an appropriate expert. And I don't mean just somebody who's a mold remediator. I mean to have companies that, such as, like I used the BioPlan example, that have science behind what they're doing to determine whether or not it makes sense to have your facility sprayed or cleaned or some things entered into your air conditioning system, etc. Having said that, in addition, if you are suffering from, say, mold or sickness of some unknown origin in your home and the insurance company has failed to correct your home, which is creating this problem, then whether or not you have mold coverage, you may have a cause of action against that insurance company for failing to timely resolve your claim, which then caused what we call a consequential damage in that you became ill or people became sick. And I would be stunned, having done storms for decades, I would be stunned if we did not have an unbelievable increase in allergic type, allergy reactions. I mean, Claritin should be sponsoring the county because there's probably a raise in those areas. And if I were a marketing guru, I would tell Claritin to come in with buses and drive around and say, post-storm, have you had your home remediated? If not, buy Claritin because you're going to need it. Having said that, I think that you would be as surprised at how many people are just having more flare-ups, and they don't know why. And it's not just because the season came in. It's because there is mold, or I'm using the word mold generically because it means any kind of bacteria-based, airborne indicator that creates a potential for your body to react and to overreact and to create that allergic type of response. And I think that, in some cases, people have shied away. That is, adjusters and other representatives have shied away from even reporting mold because there's a lot of mold exclusions in policies, which is another interesting issue of I have no idea why anybody would not get significant mold coverage because we are in a southern, hot, humid environment. Mm-hmm. And I would bet that if you went to 100 homes, 130 of them would have mold. So you're going to have more homes in this county that have some form of that. Now understand, any kind of, quote, mold, and I'm using that word generically, anytime you have moisture that can accumulate and dry and you have humidity, it is a breeding ground for that. And that's not a scare tactic. It's just reality. Most of those kinds of problems, are so microscopic that people in their normal sensibilities and their autoimmune systems take care of it. But you just can be ever sensitive to the fact that how many people were in their homes after the storm and didn't have power. So you had moisture, 80 degrees, 90 degrees, moisture in the air in your homes, getting into the walls and things like that for days, sometimes weeks for many people who didn't have power. The idea that, all of a sudden mold just dried up and it's no longer there is just silly. And it doesn't mean that every home has it. It means that it could be the cause of certain types of subtle ailments in children or your allergies flaring up a bit more. And it's just you need to pay attention to that. That's all. And there are remediation efforts. There are companies that aren't trying to make a buck off the insurance company by doing this, but they're trying to go in and advise you. And in fact, this one company I was telling you, that I mentioned about, they're actually developing a special kit now that's going to eventually be open for retail. But the concept is that every business, every company should have this bioplant-like company come in and look at that, because there is literally no downside and only an upside, and it is very cost-effective. It's not very expensive to do this service. So it's so important for people to take advantage of that and recognize that that's why your allergies are flaring up, because if it was different, you wouldn't have, this overreaction.
Real quick question, and I'm going to get to Phil on the phone. Will the insurance company come back and say, hey, it was up to you to determine whether or not there was mold in the home? In other words, you may have people that come in. You may have, a public adjuster. You may have this and that type of person that comes in, and if they don't tell you, how would you know? Because now that we've had this storm, we're finding out that there are a lot of times that people do have mold and they don't know. It can be behind the walls. It can be in the attic. It can be in the, So is that a tactic that the insurance company will say in order to get out of paying something like that? It was, hey, you know what? You live there. It was up to you to know.
Yes. The answer is it's not as much a tactic as it's a reasonable question on behalf of the insurance company.
Yeah.
They aren't in your home. If you have a damage, you need to have it checked out. The fact that the individual or most of us aren't aware of mold still makes it incumbent upon us to check and see whether mold exists. And we have a duty to inform them what our claim is and what the basis of our claim is. Now, if they come in with a public adjuster or a private adjuster and they adjust your claim and they see moisture and they're not reporting to you that there's possible mold, you may be able to hold them accountable for that. But as a general rule, they're responding to what claims you think you have. And if you don't make a claim for your fence, they're likely not going to look at your fence. And so later on, you can't say, well, you should have seen my fence. So even though we're not as educated, we're not scientists, we still have a duty to try to find out what damages we have. And if you have mold, then you could still make a claim for it.
Let's go to Phil. Phil, you're up with Scott Major from Major Parúas and the Storm Help Team. What's up, man?
Good morning, Scott, and thank you, Kramer, for all your work on this. My question has to do with maybe experience we have with other natural disasters, in that yesterday in our paper it was announced that our local school system's got like $300 million of uninsured losses. Is it typical for government, entities like that to be uninsured or underinsured, or should we be holding our public officials accountable for? Because I know, like at Gulf Coast Community College, they had insurance, and the day after, one of these disaster recovery companies moved in, and they've been there for almost a year, and that campus is going to be better than new once they're done. But it sounds like we're going to be stuck with a $300 million bill for our school system.
There's absolutely no reason in the world, let me repeat, absolutely no reason in the world for public or private entities to not have sufficient insurance in place. If you don't, you're taking a risk that has occurred just like it has happened after this storm. So it is very important for people to be insured. In terms of those people who have not gotten coverage, such as a public entity, ultimately in the end, if they're not wise about their remediation and they waste taxpayer dollars, the answer is yes. Your property taxes and other types of monies, including some state funds, will be used to pay for that. And it is only hoped that we are being wise about our public use of that, and that in the future that local officials will ensure that they are insured. And sometimes, go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. It's like you're talking about these mold issues and stuff. The schools, because of the lack of money, are not being remediated like I see is occurring over at Gulf Coast College. They're being it's a patchwork type thing, trying to get roofs on and stuff. So the mold issues you're talking about exist in the schools that kids are go back to.
I believe that if we were to do a study of the health effects, I believe you would see more children that have colds and allergies since the storm than probably in the last 20 years in the county. I can't say for sure, but that would be my opinion. And it's because they're not spending the time, the public officials, to make sure they have coverage or doing the preparatory things that are necessary, or just having knowledge of how to properly treat this. It is not about bringing in air blowers and dehumidifiers. It's about killing the mold so it doesn't regrow. And the only way to do that is in a scientific way. It's not enormously expensive, and there are ways to subsidize that. If I could talk to your public officials, I could tell them ways that they could subsidize the cleanup. But having said that, I agree with you that it is an unfortunate situation, but all of your schools, all of your businesses, you should examine that so that you guys are in good shape.
Can I ask Kramer a question?
Shoot.
Because you've had a couple discussions with the superintendent of schools. Has he explained why we didn't have insurance? Or
When you brought this question up, I started thinking back to that, and I'm not sure that he's ever said anything about it, Bill Husfeldt. I know that there were many conversations about other things concerning the storm and the school system, but I don't think that was a specific question that anybody brought up, nor do I remember him acknowledging that. No.
Yeah, there may be a reason. But I mean, we're all going to get stuck with paying the $300 million, and I'd just like to know, if there's some way we can mitigate that in the future, or like I said, it's kind of disappointing because you're seeing other public buildings where these disaster teams showed up and they've done a year's worth of work at these places, and they're better than new. But our school system is,
Scott, do you see that with other storms and storms that you've worked where, an entity like a school system is underinsured or not insured properly? And I mean, in other words, I think we see that story and we all ask ourselves, how in the heck could a school system not be properly? I mean, is that common?
Insane. The answer is I see it from time to time. Some cities are better than others. But the answer is yes. I see a lot of situations where people did not get insurance for very important things, either because they were ignorant, they lacked the intelligence, or they didn't ask professionals like us to say, what might we need, not only after a storm, but after serious rain events, hailstorms, tornadoes, things like this. Anything that can impact, for example, the cutting of power or the damage to the facilities, and they just don't have knowledge. I have educated so many public and private entities, much to their surprise, about things that they need to get and cost-effective measures to get them. And it's just a function of getting people educated and having knowledgeable people tell them what they need, because obviously, if they have any kind of insurance, they did not have a proper agent who told them of some of the most important things they needed to do prior to this storm.
Well, not to beat a dead horse, but you and I, we just recently had this conversation when you were down here for Live from the Atrium about Winn-Dixie. And that's not, I mean, I'm bringing up that as an example as to, there are huge businesses, corporations, other entities that are not back online, that are not operating right now. And we don't really know all the reasons, but it could be because of things like that. I would hate to think that these big corporations and somebody like our school system would be underinsured and not properly insured. Thank you for the phone call, man. 850-233-9988, the phone number to get on the air. 850-233-9988. To get in touch with Scott Major from Major Parúas, their phone number is 844-800-LAWS, 844-800-LAWS, Laws. Scott's been with us the whole time since after the storm. He's been right here, right in the pocket, every Tuesday and Thursday, helping everybody with any kind of legal question. I think it's really interesting that you bring up the story about the physician who's here, who is now sick. I've been wondering that for a long time. How long does it take? And I know you're not a doctor, but I mean, how long does it take for people to kind of get some of the physicalities from the mold? It's a very scary thing. Not all.
It could be immediate. Yep.
Yeah, no, not all of it. There different mold. Takes different times, and some are more dangerous than others. I totally get it. But what are some of the other ill effects, health-wise, from after a storm like Hurricane Michael?
Well, people can become, ill or can have their immune system taxed by any kind of moisture-based problem, because what happens is that we have a southern climate that is very hot and very humid. If your air conditioner is not on 24/7, you can imagine what kind of moisture can build up If you just think about even when you sweat and you feel dirty, because you need to take a shower, it's the same concept multiplied by 10. All that's happening is that this moisture, this water, is like a petri dish. It's collecting bacteria and growing, and it is fed by the warmth, the humidity, that is the breeding ground for that. That is why you see less mold in cold environments. In freezing, you won't see as much up in Minnesota that you will as in Panama City. And people can suffer anything from immune-based disorders, and that is that you can become even just sick, get a cold, because your immune system has been traumatized. It has been compromised in a subtle way to where you can't get as much of resistance as you normally would should you have been healthy. In addition, you can have the typical type of allergic, experiences, watery eyes, stuffy nose, headache, and those kinds of things that are associated with any kind of, quote, allergic response. It's all in degrees, in terms of how significant it is based on your immune system and how your body reacts to certain types of toxins. And so when I went out to some houses, for example, and brought my team out there, I made the team stand outside the home while I went inside the home myself. I must have done that, I can't even tell you how many times in Panama City, where after the storm, and it's been 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, and no air conditioning's been on, and you go into that place and you don't see blackness. There is such mold in the air that is so dangerous that only I would allow myself to go in because I needed to inspect the premises. And whenever I could, which wasn't often, but when I could, you want to have a mask. You want to have something, and that's how serious it is, when people are actually living in that environment. And they're wondering why. They're tired or have fatigue or they have allergic reactions or they're more symptomatic. And they wonder, geez, what it is. And they think that's because their neighbor, was sick 7 weeks ago. And it's not the case. It's that they were living in that. So there was a lot of those kinds of things. And it carries on. You think because some mold remediation company went out there with some air blowers and some dehumidifiers that somehow you think your mold is gone. You're delusional. It's not true. And even if you spray, so if I take Clorox and I spray it onto a black area, or a darkened area or a green area that has a certain type of mold on it, it might kill the mold that is visible to me, but it might not kill the spores that are behind it or inside it or in hidden view. If you have moisture like mold that has grown in your air vents, which probably is 80% of the people that didn't have power for a period of time, then what you're doing is that mold could, and again, in some ways it can be killed, but in some ways it could be spreading and growing, and then if you're not using air conditioner enough, it can be a treatment ground. So just paying attention and being aware, not getting hysterical about it, but making sure that you take care of yourself and you either have testing done or alternatively, you call these kinds of nationally known companies, these Clorox-like companies, that will go in and really take a look at your home for a small amount of money, or just spray your home just to make abundantly sure. Like I had my home sprayed. Even after this storm, I went through Irma. Now, I didn't get as hammered as you guys did, but I had BioPlanet come in and I had them just spray, and it took 15 minutes, and they sprayed the whole place, and it was great. And it just I'm doing it as a precautionary measure. And it was a very low cost to do that. So it's just paying attention to those things and making sure, just so that, you're taking every step to protect you and your family.
If somebody is insured and a storm comes, their house is damaged, and they have to live in a trailer or a tent. This is from Nathaniel on Facebook. And they have to live elsewhere. And he wants to know basically, can you go after the insurance company for emotional distress based on you having to change up your life so much? I guess I'm kind of paraphrasing his question.
So the answer is, under typical law, typical breach of contract standards, if you're just suing for breach of your insurance contract, the answer is no. You can only recover the monetary things that are covered by coverage A through F. However, if the insurance company does not act in good faith, if you demonstrate under 624.55 that they acted in bad faith, then part of bad faith damages include emotional distress, consequential damages, even punitive damages, other types of damages that flow, consequential damages, things that flow from the initial breach. So it's mostly going to be found in a subsequent bad faith action. So if you wrote all the letters that you've been telling your listeners about and they're not responding, and you documented and you wrote them and said, please confirm that I don't owe any additional documentation, and all those love and kisses letters that you and I chuckled about, and encouraged our listeners, then I will tell you, you likely have an excellent bad faith claim. We go forward. We first sue on the contract. We show that not only did the contract fail to be performed by the insurance company, but in addition, they acted in an unreasonable manner. We can then proceed with a lawsuit for bad faith, and you get all those damages. And they'll be big.
Wow.
Trust me. When the jury who's in Bay County is listening to yet another story of somebody who lived in squalor because the insurance company didn't pay them, and now they're ill or they have this emotional distress, they're going to tag this insurance company. And I don't know a person. Maybe you do. I don't know a person in Bay County who hasn't suffered emotional distress from this storm. I just don't know one.
No.
Whether or not it's cognizable or not, this has just been so traumatic. It's just unbelievable what people have been going through.
Yeah.
And so the answer is it would be scary for the insurance company, and it would motivate them to pay sooner when you are using these reality checks for them to help them to understand that people who have to live in trailers, RVs, with their friends, or drive 30 miles, or lost their job and now have to go to different places because their house is not fixed, their apartment's not fixed, their business is not fixed. There needs to be a price affixed to that kind of bad behavior. And as you and I talked about, there's a new sheriff in town. His name is Scott Major, and he plans on enforcing this. And everybody who I work for, I fight like the end of the world is coming. I'll tell you that everybody should be that serious about it. And if you get the right person involved who has that mentality, you're likely to get compensated in a way that makes you happy.
That's my man right there, Scott Major. We got to take a break. 850-233-9988 to get on the air with Scott Major. Ask him a question off the air. 844-800-LAWS. 844-800-LAWS. Back in a second.
The Kramer Show will be back in a sec on NewsTalk at 101. The Kramer Show on NewsTalk at 101.
Scott Major with us. Coming up on 8. Boy, this hour, my goodness. Scott, it has flown.
Good stuff. All good stuff.
To get in touch with Scott from Major Parúas and the Storm Help Team, my goodness, I can't believe how late in the hour it is. It just crept up on me. 844-800-LAWS. 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 And their website is stormhelpteam.org. Stormhelpteam.org. Well, all right, there you go. That was a really quick hour and a very informative hour. Again, thank you so much for being with us, Scott, during the long haul. Love you to death, and have a super rest of your day, bud.
Hey, thanks, and thanks for all you do, man. See you soon, okay? You be well.
You do too. See, there is Scott Major.
This is live and local morning radio. This is Kramer.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.